It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.
Good evening, everybody. You're watching America First. My name is Nicholas J. Fuentes. We have a great show for you tonight. Very excited to be back here with you tonight on Monday. This time for real. I was fixing my notes at the last second. I hit the wrong button. But we do have a big show. Lots to talk about, lots to get into tonight. Our featured story, we're going to be talking all about this letter. All about Charlie Kirk's letter to Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. Ah, yes. The infamous letter. Well, as it turns out, we now finally have the letter in our possession, and we know the contents of the letter. For those that don't know what I'm talking about, shortly after Charlie Kirk was assassinated nearly 3 weeks ago, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, went on television and claimed that Charlie Kirk was a supporter of Israel until his death. And part of the evidence of this is that Charlie Kirk sent him a letter in May of this year. Now, Netanyahu claimed or insinuated that this was a positive letter, a pro-Israel letter. Candace Owens came out the same day and effectively called Netanyahu a liar. And she claimed that Netanyahu was misrepresenting the contents or the tone or the purpose of the letter, insinuating that maybe the letter suggested that Charlie Kirk was not pro-Israel after all, or that he had criticisms of Israel, or that the contents of the letter foreshadowed maybe a turn against Israel. She threatened to release the letter, implying that she was in possession of it if, hang on one second, my audio's low, I'm being told, are we good now? Well, we'll see in a minute. If Netanyahu continued to misrepresent the contents of the letter. Well, now we actually have it, courtesy of the New York Post. Let me know if that's better. People are saying audio's low. I'll see if I can turn it up. So in any case, we have the letter now from the New York Post, not from Candace Owens after all. And this is what we have. We don't know 100% if it's real. All we know is that the New York Post is claiming that this is the infamous letter. And tonight we're going to go through it. I'm not going to read it to you in its entirety because it's about 7 pages, but I'm going to read it almost in its entirety. I'm going to read significant portions of it, and we'll go over the contents. You can tell me what you think. I will say at the outset, it is clearly not an anti-Israel letter. Contrary to all of the conspiracy theories, contrary to some of the insinuations, it is a very pro-Israel letter and is extremely consistent with Charlie Kirk's pro-Israel politics throughout his entire life. And for someone like myself, it contains no surprises. But we're going to work through it. We'll talk about how it arrived in the public. We'll talk about, like I said, what's in it. We'll read through most of it. And we'll discuss the significance of the letter in the context of the theory. We're also going to talk tonight about the Gaza peace plan, which was unveiled by President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu today in a press conference at the White House. And it's not great. It's basically the same plan that we have seen, for the most part, every single time for the past year and a half. And so we'll talk about what's in the new peace plan. I'll give you my position on it. Spoiler alert, I do not believe this is going to end in a Palestinian state. And honestly, at this point, what would you even call the peace process? A couple weeks ago, Israel tried to kill the negotiators on the other side. They failed. They have already violated every ceasefire that they've ever agreed to. And both the Trump administration and the Israeli government have proven that they are not trustworthy. They're not honest. So what exactly are we doing here? They talk about peace process. They talk about ceasefire proposals and plans for peace and all this. I just doubt the integrity and the legitimacy of the whole process, the whole entire thing. So we'll talk all about that too. I was trying to decide actually tonight which is the bigger story. And unfortunately, I think people are even more interested in the Charlie Kirk conspiracy than in what's actually happening in the Middle East, which contains sort of an irony. But we'll talk about all that. It's going to be a packed show. Before we get into it, I want to remind you to smash the follow button on Rumble, smash the like button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the show. Also, make sure to check out my collaboration with Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah, I'm definitely.
Earlier tonight, I appeared on System Update with Glenn, and this is a collaboration which is a long time coming. We've talked about it for months and tried to get it together for a little while, and finally we made it happen. It was a great conversation. I talked to him about 7 o'clock Central Time, I think. We did about an hour, and we covered a lot of different stuff. We talked about my generational run. We talked about Charlie Kirk. We talked about the usual suspects, Israel, the Jewish Zionist right wing, all that kind of stuff. And it was a great talk. And I will say about Glenn and about Michael Tracy, who sometimes hosts his show, I have to say, because I've now done that show with both of them. I did it with Michael Tracy last year. I did the show with Glenn tonight. They are probably some of my favorite interviewers or hosts because we actually have a disagreement, but it's an intelligent, thoughtful disagreement. I find that so many shows that I go on, it's one of two things. It's either I'm explaining the Jewish issue to them, they either agree or disagree, and I'm in the position of basically telling them how it works, because they don't know, or they're a shill, or they're pro-Israel themselves. Or if you're talking to somebody on the left, it's like a hysterical, they're calling you a Nazi, they assume that you're a racist, that you hate all non-white people or something like that. They just assume you're lying. And so when I talk to Glenn and Michael Tracy, they are progressive, they are left-wing, but they know the relevant facts. They know the score. They're not going to dispute that Israel influences the country. They're not going to dispute that Jewish Americans are influential. And they're also not hysterical Democrat partisans. They're not trying to convince you that every Republican president sucks and every Democrat president is awesome, like a Harry Sisson or a Dean Withers. So I actually really enjoy my conversations with them. It's pushback, but it's smart. It's thoughtful. It's not, they kind of know the same information that we know. So it's a very good conversation. Really appreciated it. And Glenn, he's a pretty mainstream figure, so it still takes a little bit of courage to have me on the show, even though I'm more popular than ever. It still is commendable. So make sure to check it out to support him. It's on System Update. It's on his channel on Rumble. I also uploaded it as well. What else? Just a quick thing. I'm not going to be here on Friday. I have some major collaborations planned over the weekend. So I'll be here until Thursday. Friday, I'm not going to be doing a show. I got a few things lined up into the weekend and into next week, which I think you're going to be excited about. So no show on Friday. And one other thing before we get into the news, this is what I was pulling up when I accidentally went live right before the show, kind of having some technical difficulties here. One thing I wanted to touch on just before we get into the news, and I hope I don't spend too much time on this. Sometimes I get a little talkative here, but I did just want to touch on this briefly. I discussed it actually with Glenn during the interview. I saw this tweet today from Matt Walsh, which I really think needs to be discussed. And I'm on my timeline today, and I see Matt Walsh, who you know from Daily Wire. And as you know, Matt Walsh is Catholic. He's white. He's not Jewish. but he works at Daily Wire for Ben Shapiro. And as we now know, since Candace departed Daily Wire, Candace Owens that is, it is basically a condition of working for Daily Wire that you are not against Israel. You can't talk about Israel too much. You can't oppose Israel. You cannot talk too much or oppose Israel's influence in America. It seems the most you can say at Daily Wire about Israel is that you're not an Israeli. To the extent that you can be critical of Israel, you can say things like, I am against all foreign aid. I am against all foreign wars. I only like America. I'm not an Israeli. That's about the extent of it. Go any further than that, you're going to get fired. You're going to lose your job. You're going to run into problems. And Matt Walsh, for that reason, he's known as basically being an ideological white advocate or something like this. It seems that the only issues he talks about are the race relations between whites and everybody else. Blacks, Indians, Hispanics, Asians, immigrants, but never talking about the race relations between Jews and whites or Jews and everybody else. And I find that to be pretty curious. I think it's pretty obvious what's going on there in light of what we know about Daily Wire. And I wanted to talk about one thing he said in particular today on Twitter, which I think maybe shines a light on this. Today on Twitter, Matt Walsh posted this. He said, quote, "The mayor of Dearborn, Michigan is Abdullah Hammoud. The guy running against him in the mayoral race is Nagi Al-Hamdigi. The mayor's chief of staff is Zanib A. Hussein. The police chief is Issa Shaheen. He oversees the commander of the patrol division, Madhu Bazi. The public health director is Ali Abazid. Don't forget city council members Kamal Al-Sawafi and Mustafa Hammoud." Question, he says, is this what our founding fathers had in mind? That's a question that the residents of Dearborn can consider as they awake at 5:30 a.m. to the Muslim call to prayer blasted over the loudspeakers by the local mosque. They can keep thinking about it as they get in their cars and drive to work down Osama Siblani Street. Is this America? If the entire country resembles Dearborn in 50 years, in what sense will America still exist? And, you know, I see this tweet, and of course, I directionally agree with the sentiment. And the sentiment is, of course, broadly speaking, that America is radically changing because of immigration, specifically non-white immigration. Non-white immigration from the Middle East, Latin America, and Asia is rendering America unrecognizable because there are so many immigrants coming in such a short amount of time, and they form ethnic enclaves, and they basically then graft their old country onto our country. And if this process continues ad infinitum, it's a valid question. Will all of America look like a patchwork of ethnic enclaves? Muslims, Indians, Chinese, Latin Americans. And then in what sense will America be the same country as it once was? Valid question, directionally correct. Here's the issue, though, that I take with it. In the first place, is America being invaded by Muslims? Europe is being invaded by Muslims, no doubt. The United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy. Most of the migrants pouring into these European countries are sub-Saharan Africans from Africa and Muslim Arabs from the Middle East. And so to the extent that you have a foreign-born or non-white population in Europe, mostly these are African sub-Saharan blacks and Arab, Muslim, North African, and Middle Easterners. But that's not really the case in the United States. In the United States, it's mostly Hispanics from the Northern Triangle of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. It's Venezuelans. It's people from South and Central America. And it's Indians and Chinese that are coming in on worker visas. It's really not so much Muslims. And, you know, case in point, Dearborn, Michigan is not a huge city. To the extent that you have Somalis in Minneapolis, Minneapolis is not one of the bigger cities. But cities like Chicago, it's a third Mexican. Cities like LA, I think it's mostly Mexican at this point. Cities like Miami, New York, significant Hispanic, Asian populations. So why always attacking Muslims then? Well, Glenn Greenwald and it's sort of interesting. I did his show tonight, but I saw this on Twitter today. Glenn replied to Matt Walsh's tweet and sort of said the same thing. He said, people who try to convince Americans that the primary threat to their lives is Muslims are almost always, one, those eager to convince Americans they have the same enemies as Israel and must thus unite with Israel in its wars, or two, those who work for people with that agenda. So either people like Ben Shapiro or people that work for Ben Shapiro, people like Matt Walsh. And it only makes common sense. The Jews in America want America to fight Israel's wars against Iranians, against Hamas, against the Houthis, against Hezbollah. But Americans don't care about Muslims. Hamas is not a threat to America. Iran is not a threat to America. So what you see ceaselessly on Zionist-controlled Fox News, on Jewish-controlled Daily Wire, on Jewish-controlled Blaze, etc., is the endless fear-mongering about Sharia law and Muslims. Do we want America to have Sharia law? No. Do we want America to be Muslim? No. But are they a significant immigrant group? Not really. More so in Europe, less so here. And is the real reason they're pushing that line, is it because they really present a clear and present danger to taking over America? Or is it because that sort of thinking makes us sympathetic to Israel's wars against Muslims and Arabs? Matt Walsh replies to Glenn Greenwald. He says, "You got me, Glenn. I'm opposed to building an Islamic state in the middle of the American heartland because of my love for Israel. It couldn't just be that I'm concerned about my own country. Your Israel fetish has rotted your brain, Glenn. You're obsessed with Israel, Glenn." Now, I've got a really big problem with this. I've got a really big problem with all of that. Because what you're starting to see and what you've been seeing for the past couple of years is that people like Matt Walsh and even people like Charlie Kirk until the day that he died, people like Steve Saylor, many of the Bronze Age pervert crowd, these people like Raw Egg Nationalist, Lomez, etc., they are really ramping up the nativist rhetoric to sort of compensate for the fact that they will never criticize Israel or the Jews. And let's think about this in terms of systems here. When we talk about whites and Muslims, whites and blacks, whites and Hispanics, we're talking about identity politics. We're talking about the politics of immutable, essential identities. What does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be white? What does it mean to be an immigrant? This is the politics of identity. And it's the politics of these immutable, essential characteristics like race, religion, whether we're native or foreign born, what language we speak, all the things that come with being a white American versus a non-white foreigner. And if that's the way we're thinking about politics, and I think that's the way we all are thinking about politics, why then does that never extend to Jews for somebody like Matt Walsh? In other words, we can talk about Muslims bringing Sharia law, and we can all agree that as white Americans, that's undesirable. And we could talk about how Muslims are taking up too much space and too much power in certain cities. Do we want a city to be all Muslim? Do we want to live in a city with a Muslim mayor, health commissioner, police commissioner? The signs are in Arabic script? Of course not. That's the relation between white and Muslim people in America because of mass migration. But why then do the same people that are so eager and so vocal, so incendiary, these people that are the biggest culture warriors, the toughest talkers about Muslims or blacks or immigrants or illegals or Hispanics or Indians. Why do those people never talk about Jews? Why do they never talk about the race relations between whites and Jews or Jews and everybody else? In other words, you're willing to say that the mayor of Dearborn is Muslim and the municipal government of Dearborn is too Muslim. But how come you never talk about how America's government is too Jewish? Why are you willing to talk about one but not the other? You talk about our black crime problem. You talk about the Muslim Dearborn problem. You talk about the Hispanic illegal immigrant problem. And by the way, those are all problems. That's all legitimate. But you never talk about the Jewish running media, academia, Hollywood, government, finance problem. Why not? You're willing to list all the Muslim sounding names and their call to prayer in Dearborn. Why don't you say the same thing about all the Jews in Surfside, Florida? Or how about all the Jews in Brooklyn, New York? Or how about all the Hasidic Jews that have basically created colonies in New Jersey, all over New York, in LA, in South Florida? How about, forgive me, how about all the Jewish names in Hollywood, in the financial industry? How about the 5 out of 8 Ivy League universities that have Jewish presidents? How about the endless talk about the Holocaust and playing the shofar and hearing the Torah and the Talmud and all this? We never hear that from Matt Walsh. We never hear that from all these conservatives. Why not? And I'm just getting really sick and tired of conservatives that pretend to be, and what they're doing is compensating, pretending to be based by punching down against black people with no agency, illegal immigrants with no legal standing, Muslims who are foreign in every sense of the word, but are absolutely terrified and cowardly when it comes to confronting Jewish power. And that would be punching up. And it's not to say that we don't have a problem with black crime. It's not to say that we don't have a problem with illegal Hispanics or others for that matter. It's not to say we don't have a problem with Indians on work visas. It's not to say we don't have a problem with this Muslim invasion of certain specific communities and townships. But when you look at the overarching problem, when you look at the overarching foreign influence in America, it's not coming from any of these localized groups. It's not coming from any of these low agency third world groups. It's coming from the transnational Jewish syndicate, which is really in the big leagues. And so, for somebody like Matt Walsh, hey man, just answer the question. I tweeted at him today. You're willing to say all the Muslim names in Dearborn. On some level, who gives a fuck? It's Dearborn, Michigan. Jews run America. Hello? And I'm not saying, by the way, before anybody jumps in, I'm not saying I'm glad that Dearborn, Michigan is a Muslim colony. I'm not happy about that. But it's Dearborn, Michigan. Yes, Dearborn, Michigan is a colony of Muslims. Washington, D.C., New York City, Los Angeles, Miami are colonies of the Jews. Are you going to talk about that? Because unless and until you're willing or able to talk about all those Jewish names, all those foreign sounding names with their foreign religion, their foreign desert religion and culture, then don't try to pretend like you're some sort of pro-white advocate. Don't pretend like you're brave or courageous or some kind of culture war, some kind of patriot. You're not a patriot. You are an accommodationist. You work for Ben Shapiro. And by the way, this is the same guy who three weeks ago said, we just need to bring the whole right wing together. We need to unite the right. Unite the right against what? Dearborn, Michigan's mayor? How about uniting the right against the Jewish mothership controlling America? Then we can deal with Dearborn. Then we could deal with Minneapolis. Why don't we start with the ADL, AIPAC, B'nai B'rith, Hillel, the Israeli Foreign Ministry, the U.S. State Department? Why don't we start there? BlackRock, Blackstone. I mean, why don't we start with the actual institutions that have power, which are being influenced by a foreign country or foreign influence? So I saw that tweet today, and it is just another reminder that it is as important what someone does not say equally as much as what they are saying. So someone like Matt Walsh goes on Twitter naming the Muslim mayor of Dearborn. Hey, good stuff, Matt. When are you going to talk about the Jewish mayor of America? Hello, his name is Prime Minister Netanyahu. And it never ceases to amaze me, these kind of gruff, middle-aged white guys, and yes, I'm calling out my fellow white men. It never ceases to amaze me, these gruff, middle-aged white guys with beards, drinking their Black Rifle coffee, wearing their flannel shirts, rolling up their sleeves. You know, they got so much to say about the blacks, about the Muslims, about the immigrants. They will never say boo about the Jews. And that's just cowardly, as far as I'm concerned. That's just cowardly and sad. Matt Walsh's show every single day is a screed. I don't think that's hyperbolic to say. I watch his show. Every day it's a screed. Foreigners, Somalis, Arabs, illegals, savages, animals. I want heads on pikes, communists, etc. That's his show every day. Every day is rage porn. It's invective. And once again, don't get me wrong, agree on most of it. But who is the author of most of it? Who is the author of communism, Matt? Who is the author of transgenderism? Who is the author of the melting pot? Who is the author of the open society of America? Who is the author of these things? Will you answer that question on your show? Day in, day out, screed against these browns and blacks and this, that, and the other. And look, and I get it. But that's sort of low-hanging fruit. Let's talk about the big picture here. Or are we afraid to do that because of who's down the hall and to the left in the big chair in the executive suite? Well, and what's ironic even about that, Ben Shapiro isn't even down there in Nashville. It's too good for Nashville. He's in South Florida with his homeboys. You would say something like, hey, Matt Walsh, maybe before you criticize Israel, why don't you walk down the hall and clear it with your boss? But Shapiro's not even in the same office building. All the Daily Wire staff are in Nashville. Shapiro's in South Florida in the Jewish colony. If that doesn't say it all, I mean. So anyway, I saw that tweet. This is my reply. I said, quote, you constantly talk about how cities like Dearborn or Minneapolis are run by Muslims, which is a problem. Why don't you ever talk about government, academia, media, Hollywood, finance being run by Jews? Did the founding fathers intend on that? Did they intend on people with Steen and Berg and Witz? Were those people supposed to be running the banks, the news, the government, the State Department? I don't think so. Get real. Get a grip, man. You're a white Catholic. Start acting like it. Don't be such a coward. And listen, and Matt Walsh, when he is ready to just talk about the real issue, I will shake his hand. I will apologize. I will be right there with him. But until that day comes, I have to call you out. It's not personal. I don't hate you. I don't even think he's a bad guy, but he is being a coward. You are being a coward. I will hear no more chest beating, chest thumping by white men who are so cowardly they won't talk about who is really taking our sovereignty from us. Don't you notice it's always these white men, and I'm going to vilify him in the other direction for a moment, pardon me. It's all these white men beating their chest. Our civilization, explorers, pioneers, conquerors, these brown people could never. Oh, really, tough white man? Oh, really, big white man? My ancestor? The founding fathers would never. What do you think the founding fathers would say about you working for Ben Shapiro, huh? What do you think George Washington, the hero, the Titan, what do you think George Washington, or any of them for that matter, would think about you working for Ben Shapiro? What do you think about America going to war for Israel? What do you think they would say about Jews running the Ivy Leagues, Jews running the media, Jews running our Congress, bribing our politicians, controlling the National Security Council, the State Department, the Pentagon? The money, the printing of the money. What do you think they would say about that? What do you think they would say about you? Do not even say, founding fathers, you don't have the right. You have no right. Keep their names out of your fucking mouth, Matt Walsh. That name, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, keep those names out of your mouth as long as you're working for Ben Shapiro, you fucking traitor. We need to unite against the left. No, pal. We need to unite as Americans for our sovereignty and independence. It ain't a difference of opinion. It's black and white, clear as crystal. That is the predicament that we're in. We are occupied, and it ain't by Muslims. It's by Jews, obviously. And listen, they need to hear that from their right wing. They need to hear that from their right flank. I appreciate Glenn Greenwald and Michael Tracy giving these guys a hard time. They need to hear it from someone on their right. I'm not pro-immigration. I'm not pro any of this stuff. So it's for your own good. It's for your own damn kids, Matt. I cannot stand it. And I saw this clip the other day from Josh Hammer and Mark Levin. These people, like, deeply, seriously, all real Americans, if you are a real American, if you were born in this country, I don't even care who you are, what you are, if you are a real American that loves this country, you have generations in this country, your family or you fought for this flag, fought for the Constitution, fought for our church, fought for our civilization. For all of you, I say about Josh Hammer and Mark Levin and Laura Loomer, fuck them. Fuck them. Deeply, seriously, get them the fuck out of our country. I saw Josh Hammer and Mark Levin. Now that Charlie Kirk was killed, they got together on their show where they're advocating for Netanyahu and war with Iran and more dead Americans, more dead young white men for Israel. I saw them get together on their show and they said, well, one concern we have about the death of Charlie Kirk is that who is going to keep the gate and prevent filth like Nick Fuentes from taking over? Josh Hammer said, who's going to prevent anti-Semitic filth like Nick Fuentes from taking over? You're the filth. Newsflash, buddy. Hey, Josh Hammer, Mark Levin, you're the filth. You are f***ing scum. You are traitors. You do not belong here. You are not American. You're not home. Remember that. Never forget that. You want to talk about this land was promised to us 2,000 years? You ain't there. You're not home. Never forget that. You get a little too comfortable. You're feeling a little too comfortable here talking like that about Americans. This is Josh Hammer, the same guy that said Europeans have Jew hatred in their DNA. That's what Josh Hammer thinks of us. He says Europeans have Jew hatred in their DNA. We're supposed to go and fight their wars, though, and love them and love their country and love everything they're about. They're filth. They're Jew-hating filth. You're filth, pal. You are an alien. You ain't home. Don't forget that for 1 second. It drives me crazy. And whatever. You know, on some level, that's who they are. That's what they've always been. And, you know, I think they should be treated with dignity and they should have rights and everything like that. They should not be allowed to have the privileges to have power over Americans at all. But to the extent that it's sort of like the scorpion and the frog, that's what they do. That's what they're going to do. That's what they've always done. They're looking out for themselves. Josh Hammer, Mark Levin, Laura Loomer, they're looking out for themselves. And on some level, you can't really blame them. They're doing what they always do for their own benefit, to advance their own interest, to take their own side. Can you hate them for taking their own side? If you were a Jew and you enjoyed the power that they have and you had the history that they had, I mean, maybe you'd act the same way. What I cannot countenance is a white Catholic American man signing up to work for them. That's what I can't abide. Josh Hammer, Mark Levin, Laura Loomer, they do what they do. They're doing their thing. But Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles are working for them. You got Christian white men working on their behalf. That's the part that, that's a real problem. That's a deep treachery. And no, we can't actually table that topic. You know, Matt Walsh wants to say, let's just table that and let's just get together and we'll defer that disagreement to another day. It's like, you don't understand. You work for Ben Shapiro. We're never going to be able to unite on that basis. Okay? You work for an operative of a foreign government. Ben Shapiro goes live every day to advocate for dead white Americans for his country, and he hates us. Do you understand that? I'd almost prefer communist. I'd almost prefer a liberal. Ben Shapiro goes live every single day to say, more dead white Americans for Israel. And they hate us anyway. They think we're Jew haters in our bones because we're so jealous of them. That's what they think about us. They hate us and they want us to die for them anyway. And you work for them. Shapiro is the worst of all of them. He is the worst scum-sucking traitor out of all of them. Him, Mark Levin, Josh Hammer, they are the worst. And you work for them against your own people. And you think that if they give you a platform to spew invective against other aliens, that maybe you're going to have it better off? You ain't American, pal. You're not American. You had American colonists that were working for the British. At least the British were white and Christian. You're worse. At least the loyalists to the British crown when America was founded, hey, at least it was a Christian white monarchy. You're loyal to some antichrist state in the Middle East. They hate us. You're worse than Benedict Arnold. You're worse. You're on the level of like Judas. Anyway. So I'd spend too much time talking on that, but I see that stuff in it. What is being done there, we just need to call that out. You can't get away with that, actually. You can't get away with, we're going to crank up the hatred of Nogs so nobody notices that we never talk about Israel and I'm going to cover for them. You have to be called out. We have to call it out for what it is. You are an accommodator. You are a traitor, you are a collaborator, you are working with the enemy. It is 2025, there are no excuses anymore. It is 2025, there are no excuses to be a white Catholic working for Ben Shapiro. Do better, man. White man to white man, Catholic to Catholic, American to American. Do better. Do better, please. You have one life. Do you want your legacy? They're killing everybody out there. God forbid, I don't wish that on Matt Walsh. Do you want your legacy to be guy that worked for Ben Shapiro? Guy that helped Ben Shapiro shore up his dying credibility by being a goyish face for a Zionist enterprise? Is that what you want to be remembered for? I sure hope not. That would be sad. So I'm just beside myself about the whole, the level of gaslighting. We're done with it. I told you a couple of years ago, it's white ass niggas going hard as fuck. No more games, no more playing around, no more gaslighting. That's just how it's got to be from now on. It's got to be only America first. So anyway, and as far as Josh Hammer and Mark Levin, in the climate of political violence, I don't want that to be construed as anything other than what it is, which is I'm just calling them out for being disgusting traitors. I think that they should be lawfully deported to Israel. I think they should lawfully have their citizenship revoked and returned to Israel. But I'm not advocating any violence or I don't want that to be misconstrued. We're in a very tense political climate, so you got to be careful when you get too hot about certain things. But no, I think that Laura Loomer, Josh Hammer, Mark Levin, I think their rights and dignity should be respected as they're lawfully have their citizenship revoked and they're returned to Israel. And they should be treated humanely. I think that when they're seized by DHS, I think it should be done, we don't need to send in the SWAT team. They can wear plain clothes, knock on Mark Levin's door and say, listen, buddy, your citizenship's been revoked by Emperor Trump. We're placing you in handcuffs. You're going home today. It could be it doesn't need to be a military cargo ship. It could be a commercial jet. I'm fine with that. I think that's fine. But something like that's at a certain point, it has to happen at some point. At a certain point, it just has to happen. Because these are not Americans. Mark Levin, this guy's he's literally a foreign agent, as is Josh Hammer, as is Laura Loomer. What are they still doing here? You need to go home now. It's time. You have a country. That country is making itself safe. It's securing its right to exist by every means at its disposal. It is time now for you to go there. So anyway, that's that. But I do want to move on. I want to get into our news. I didn't think I'd fly off the handle like that, but Walsh really bothers me because he's so smug. His whole demeanor is so smug, and it's like, dude, you work for Ben Shapiro, so wipe the fucking smirk off your face. Wipe that, get rid of that smug attitude, that macho masculine thing. You got to just leave that at the door. When you punch in on the clock and you go to work for Ben Shapiro, you got to leave that at the door. You want to be smug, you want to smirk, you want to be macho, you can do that when you're at home fishing. When you clock in and you punch in at Zog headquarters, you got to leave that at the door because you ain't him, man. You are not him. You are not that guy. All right, but let's move on.
All right, first things first. That was a dope show. I enjoyed it. I got a lot of notes, and I broke it up in two parts. So not sure if we're going to just upload the full video or if I'll break it down into two, but I'll do my responses in two parts, with the first part focusing on Matt Walsh and what I like to call this controlled opposition, or what I like to refer to as Nick when he called it a while ago. I think he was talking actually about Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, but this is what I see as controlled opposition, and we'll get into the convo perhaps on Tucker and Candace as well. I think they come up somewhere here, perhaps in the second part of what we'll talk about when we're discussing the letter that Charlie Kirk allegedly wrote to Bibi Netanyahu. So let's begin with Matt Walsh. I'm glad that Nick is calling out Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh is one of these race baiters that, just like Nick said, he's quick to call out and stir up chaos between black and white people, between white and brown people, between white and brown, I guess, Arab and Hispanics. He's quick to punch down, like Nick said. But when it comes to the influence on the country that Jewish people are having, he seems to be extremely quiet. Now, obviously, he works for Ben Shapiro. Obviously, he is working for Daily Wire, and what has happened with Candace Owens there, he knows that he's got to toe that line. So let's go through some of these notes, and y'all tell me where I'm off, where I'm wrong, where I may be having some blind spots, as always. All right, so why do I say Matt Walsh is controlled opposition? Well, because he pushes for America first. He pushes as if he wants the culture of America to stay American, but then you're not factoring in the influence that Israel has had on America. And the only reason that you're not doing that, in my opinion, is because you're working for Ben Shapiro, because you're controlled by the people that you work for, because you don't want to step out there and call out the Jewish people, call out the Israeli influence. You'd rather just take the easy way and appear as if you're this, like Nick described, like this burly man's man in your flannel, calling out black people and calling out Hispanics and calling out Muslims. Read the Jewish names. Let's discuss how Jewish people have overwhelming power, let's say, or control when it comes to AIPAC, when it comes to the media outlets, when it comes to Hollywood, when it comes to the entertainment industry. You never call out those things. When it comes to the amount of presidents that are at the Ivy League schools, what's the percentage of Jewish presidents at Ivy League schools compared to the Jewish presence in America? And you're setting yourself up for this, Matt Walsh, because you're so willing and so aggressive in calling out the other aspects. So obviously I just said, Nick, I'm just going through the notes again. Sometimes I start to ramble. Y'all know how I do. But let me make sure that I stay focused and address every single thing that I wrote down. So he's quick to point out the influence of Islamic culture impacting America, however, refuses to point out anything when it comes to how Jews and Israel are controlling our politics and most powerful leaders. And this actually, I think, is going to come up later when Josh Hammer said that Europeans have Jew hatred in their DNA. So when I go back to Matt Walsh, here you have somebody in Josh Hammer who's willing to call out or willing to say that Europeans, which are obviously the people who colonized America. When we talk about white culture in America, we're talking about Europeans. So here, Josh Hammer is saying that Europeans have Jew hatred in their DNA. But look at Matt Walsh, scared to say anything. So perhaps there is a certain level of, I don't know if it's Jew hatred. I would say that Europeans are actually very scared and are behaving in a way as if they're scared to call out the influence that Jews have had on America, even though Jewish people who will sit here and say, like Josh Hammer, Europeans have Jew hatred in their DNA. Americans are the only reason why you have your country. Americans are the only reason why Israel feels that they can commit some of the actions that they commit when it comes to that Middle Eastern region. Could you imagine Israel without American support? So I almost look at that comment like the nerve of Josh Hammer, like the audacity. But it is what it is. I guess Josh Hammer and Matt Walsh feel differently. All right, so why isn't he willing to? We all know why he isn't willing to. Well, one, because of his paycheck, and two, because of what comes with calling out Israel. See, a lot of people will say that Nick Fuentes was banned because he is racist, misogynist. He made certain comments on black people or black men having sex with white women, and that's what got him banned. No, that's what they used to get him banned. That's not why Ben Shapiro tweeted and put out that video that was secretly recorded when Nick Fuentes was talking about the discussion that I just said. No. He saw that Nick Fuentes was willing to call out Jewish America, not just focus on Israel, but was willing to call out the Jewish influence in America. And Ben Shapiro wanted to nip that in the bud from the jump. And the best way to do that, he thought, well, it was kind of proven true, perhaps you would say, because Nick Fuentes got canceled on all these platforms. Now, perhaps what they didn't count on was that now that Nick Fuentes has been banned on all those accounts, it developed something in him that people like Candace Owens have, where you back me into a corner, you try to kick me while I'm down, you try to destroy me, and now I'm coming back with a vengeance. And perhaps that's what we're seeing. And people recognize that because when you back certain people into a corner, they double down. Some of them, the ones like Nick and Candace. And in their doubling down, they've created a huge following of people that feel the same way and that can see the big picture. So let's keep going. So you call out the black crime problem, you call out the illegal immigrant problem amongst Hispanics, Dearborn, Michigan having the Muslim problem, but nothing when it comes to Jews. And we kind of already touched on that. But as somebody that lives between New Jersey, right across the water from New York City, and in South Florida, in Miami, it's very interesting how Matt Walsh would conveniently act as if he doesn't know what Nick Fuentes said is true. There's places within 30 minutes of me that it's almost like the entire town, entire apartment complexes, entire neighborhoods are just Jewish. You go to Brooklyn, entire neighborhoods just Jewish. Do you not think that that changes the culture of America? Maybe Matt Walsh should look into how some of these towns are negatively impacted when it comes to taxes, because in a lot of these towns, the Jewish people, they will, and you can look this up, they will register. I think one of the things that they do is register as their homes as places of worship, so they're not paying taxes. A lot of the Jews that live in these areas, they're taking resources from the town, just being totally honest, and not contributing back to the town, which actually increases the taxes among other Americans in those towns. So Matt Walsh conveniently disregards that, doesn't bring it up, probably acts naive to it. These fake tough guys that wear these, the burly, they got the beard with the lumberjack shirts that act as if they're speaking aggressively, act as if they have no care, act as if they just talk facts and they don't care about feelings, knock it off. That all changes when you clock into work. That all changes when you're writing an X post, and in the back of your mind, you're knowing that you can never speak out against anything pro-Israel or anything pro-Jewish. That's why Nick is calling out Matt Walsh. And I've agreed with Matt Walsh on certain things, just like I'm sure Nick Fuentes agrees with Matt Walsh on certain things. But when you're so aggressive in calling out LGBTQ, blacks, Hispanics, immigrants overall, Muslims, why not have that same energy in calling out Jews in Israel? I thought you were America first. And like Nick said, you can't hide behind the whole, oh, I'm not for any wars. America get involved in any wars. I'm not for America funding any efforts. That's a cop-out. That's a cop-out. Why don't you address it as directly as you addressed the names in Dearborn, Michigan? Why don't you address it with that type of energy? Because there's really only one country that is coming here and that has a history of coming here with their Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu and convincing us to go to war and having young Americans die while their Israeli troops stay at home. Matt Walsh, this is clownish, cowardly behavior. And I'm glad that Nick is calling it out. And I got to check out that Glenn Greenwald. I like Glenn Greenwald. Most of the things that I see from him, I'm entertained by, and I appreciate his perspective on. So I'm definitely gonna have to tap into that Glenn Greenwald, Nick Fuentes. Maybe we'll.
You might want to check the connection settings in the Google Home app.
That just scared me. So we got this Google Home. I don't even want to say the name again because then it'll start talking. I don't know what's going on. Whatever. But yeah, I got to check out the Glenn Greenwald. Maybe we'll upload that as well if they don't put it on YouTube. So let's keep going. Yeah, so Nick said pretending to be base, but by punching down on blacks, Muslims, and Hispanics, but never addressing the BlackRock influence, never addressing some of the influences that I discussed earlier, entertainment, Hollywood, never addressing the influence of AIPAC and how it's controlling our government on both sides, if you believe that there are actually both sides. Why not address those things? Matt Walsh is being a coward. So what someone won't say, Nick said this, what someone won't say is equally as important as the things they say. The things that Matt Walsh won't say are equally as important as the things that he is saying. And I would actually say that the things that he won't say a lot more about the things that he is saying. All right? They say a lot more about him. So I think that that can be more in certain cases. And when it comes to Matt Walsh, it is more in certain cases. So Nick said you got these gruff middle-aged white guys with beards drinking their Black Rifle coffee, wearing their flannel shirts, rolling up their sleeves. They got so much to say about certain groups. Pay attention to the group that they are never willing to speak on. Never willing to speak on. He said all these white men beating their chest, talking about the founding fathers would never. What do you think the founding fathers would say about you working for Ben Shapiro? I think that that's a very interesting conversation. I think that that's when you think about George Washington and in his farewell address, when he said that we shouldn't be involved in foreign affairs, what do you think George Washington would say about you working for Daily Wire? Nick made it very clear. Nick Shapiro. Ben Shapiro gets on his live every day and campaigns for what? Campaigns for what? For Americans to support Israel in what? Ethnic cleansing, genocide, risking American lives, going to fight in Iraq for quote unquote weapons of mass destruction that are never there. What is Ben Shapiro? We all know what Ben Shapiro is. He's an arm of the Israeli government. He's a propaganda arm of the Israeli government. And that's who Matt Walsh pledges his allegiance to and his livelihood to. So before you start talking about what the founding fathers would like and not like, and pointing out the black issues, the Muslim issues, the Hispanic migrant issues, before you start pointing all that stuff out, why don't you point out who's actually controlling a lot of this? Who you work for? Why you are controlled opposition? You're a controlled freedom fighter, bro. You're only punching down. You're being the bully that works for the opposite group that you claim, or the opposite agenda that you claim that you're for, which is America first. You work for Ben Shapiro, bro. That's Israel first. We all know that. It's the cat's out the bag, right? So that's something that Matt Walsh perhaps needs to address internally. So I think Nick said we are occupied, and it ain't by Muslims. It's by Jews. Let's be honest. Muslims don't have the influence in America that Jewish people have. And why is it okay for Jewish people to have that influence, but Muslims to not have that influence? Matt Walsh, that's what I would ask you. Is it a race thing? Is it a skin pigmentation thing? What is it? Because when it comes to the wars that Muslims get us in, do you think Muslim Americans get us in more wars than Jewish Americans? Who gets us in more wars? Who led us to the war with Iraq? Who falsely misled the American public, used 9/11 as a chaos situation that they could take advantage of, even though that's Saddam Hussein had absolutely nothing to do with Osama bin Laden and who did the 9/11 attacks. And I believe that he was even fighting against Osama bin Laden at some point. So who's really misguiding us and putting American lives on the line? Who's really doing that? So Matt Walsh, yeah. He said you got Josh Hammer, Mark Levin, Laura Loomer, you're not home. Yo, this Laura Loomer lady, I don't know much about her, but she seems a bit kooky. She seems a bit kooky. So I said earlier that Josh Hammer made the comment, or that Nick said that Josh Hammer made the comment that Europeans have Jew hatred in their DNA, like the nerve, the audacity. The nerve, the Europeans are the only reason why you have Israel. Like, do Israelis think that they just got Israel on their own? That they just came in and stormed Palestinians and just took it over on their own? Like, unless I'm mistaken on the history of how Israel was created, Europeans are the reason why you have Israel. And if you do believe that Europeans have Jew hatred in their DNA, which I actually don't even think that you're completely wrong, or perhaps even wrong. I think that you're wrong, obviously, when you lump it into everybody, but I understand what you're getting at. I think I understand what you're getting at. And that's actually, based on the history and research that I've done, one of the reasons why the Jewish state was created in Israel. I believe what Josh Hammer is referring to, now he said it, not me, right? But I believe what he's referring to is that when it comes to European countries, yeah, the Jewish treatment hasn't been so well. Didn't Jews get kicked out of a lot of European countries? So I understand what Josh Hammer is saying. But where I would say the nerve and the audacity when you project that to America, knowing that America was colonized by Europeans, when you project that to Americans, the nerve. Because right now, America is the only reason why Israel exists. America is the only reason why Israel is protected. Bibi Netanyahu and everybody else can talk as if Israel can hold its own without America. Well, if so, I would just say, just show us. Just prove it. If you really feel that way. So, I don't know. Let's keep going. Yeah, so we already talked about how Ben Shapiro, goes online every day and he campaigns for, more dead white Americans or more Americans risking their lives, which obviously, when we get into these forever wars, and even in the past with basing our war decisions on Bibi Netanyahu, Israel, and Jewish influences, clearly we've lost a lot of Americans. So Nick said, Matt Walsh, you're worse than Benedict Arnold. You're like Judas. Yeah, I would ask Matt Walsh to perhaps, instead of projecting all of that energy outward, perhaps you project a lot of the energy towards yourself and deal with your own insecurities, because perhaps you feel that you have to overcompensate and push against blacks, Hispanics, and Muslims because you know that your hands are tied because you can't push against the people that actually are changing American culture. So I'll finish off with how Nick put it. You are not him, you're not that guy. Stop acting like it, Matt Walsh. Stay in your lane, brother.
It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.